Hey, in this lecture, we're going to go through an example involving three co-founders. And I'm going to introduce a few elements that I haven't discussed yet to show you just how you could adapt the model and adapt this calculator for your specific needs. All right, let's go. Now, what you see on your screen is the model that you downloaded in the previous lecture, or the two lectures before it. This is the version 1.6, and you'll see that there's some categories that are already there. There's some placeholders just to give you an idea of what to do with this. Now, since we're going to go with three co-founders, let's take care of that first, all right? So you'll notice that right now the column for Ellen, or the fifth co-founder, is in white. That means that can't be adjusted. All right, these are formulas, and it's there to ensure that all the percentages and calculations are correct, because otherwise it's too easy to make errors. So the white column here for Ellen, you can't adjust it, which means for three co-founders we want to just keep the three. We want to keep Ellen and two other co-founders. Now it's easier, more straightforward to just use the three together rather than leaving a space. So let's get rid of Albert and Betty right now, okay? And then we're going to clear out their percentages. And you'll see that when we do this, Ellen's percentages will go up just because I'm forcing the total percentages to add to 100. So you see that Ellen's has changed up. Now, one of the things we want to do, we want to clear out the assumptions for the first two founders for all of the other columns. You'll notice when there's no name, founder 1 and founder 2 will appear there. That's just to label it so you can see. So we're going to clear out all of them for all of the milestones. All right, so now we got it all cleared. We're only working with Carl, Dave, and Ellen, okay? When we have this, now let's look at the milestones. So for this example, we're going to have a prototype, we're going to have an angel funding stage, we're going to have a private beta, public beta, and then some kind of a growth stage. So let's say that the team values the prototype at 10%, the angel funding at 5%, or maybe 10%, private beta at 10, public beta 35, and split evenly between the last two stages. All right, so that means most of the value the team sees is kind of coming later. Okay, let's look at prototype phase now. In the prototype phase, most of the work is coming from wireframing and UX, so we're going to do 25% each there. And now I added a section here called 25,000 founders seed money. Let's say the team is raising their own money. This 20K helps them get some space or some kind of initial expenses to cover things. Not all the members could come up with it, but let's say Ellen is generous enough to come up with it, and the team has agreed that the seed will be worth 5%, the 20K, right? So whatever you decide on that, make sure it makes sense. So in this case, if Ellen's putting in 20K and she's putting all of it because no one else is providing anything, Carl and Dave is not putting anything in there, and you're saying, well, then we want the 20K to be worth 5%, then make sure this weight times the weight of the milestone, the prototype here, will add up to the percentage that you want to set for the seed. All right, so in this case, you'll notice that 50% times the 10% for the prototype means the 20K is going to earn Ellen 5%. Now, let's look at the next stage for the angel funding round. Angel funding, maybe it's going to be all kind of finishing the pitch deck, pitching, and closing the round. Maybe that's how the percentages are determined for the team. So we see that only these have value. These don't have anything. You can leave them here, but I like to just make sure it's clean, so visually I'm not confusing myself. So that means for angel funding round, we're only putting in these 2 contributions. And let's say Dave is helping Ellen with the pitch, but then Ellen is helping Dave with the pitch, but then Dave is doing 100% of the pitching and closing the round. Dave has all the access to the angels or whatever it is. Dave is doing the fundraising there, and you have to determine that the angel round will be worth 10% total. So that's how everything is going to be split there. As you go and use the assumptions for each of the milestones, just make sure that there are no error messages anywhere. And I've built these error messages here to check against both the weights of the contributions per milestone as well as the total contributions from the founders for each of the contributions. All right, so there's a check here for the rows and there's a check here for the columns here. So let's go to private beta. And let's say, hey, during private beta and public beta, there's most of the work is in development, right? So let's say 50% front end, 50% back end. Not much to do with content right now. Maybe there's not a lot of work on sales or anything else yet, okay? And then let's say, I'm going to clear these out now since we're not using it. And then let's say that's where Carl kind of really helps out. Carl is doing a lot of the, pretty much doing all of the back-end development, all right? And then Dave is doing all of the front-end development. So Ellen's kind of more of the pitch and biz dev and salesperson then, all right? So now in this case, what we're going to see is that during the development, private beta, it's mostly Carl and Dave that's going to be earning that part of the milestone, right? Because of what they're contributing and because of what the team decides is valuable for that part. All right. So now let's go to private beta. So start over. I'm going to clear these out. Private beta. There's still front-end development, and you'll see that there's an error message because there's nothing here, right? We got to make sure it adds to 100. There's still front-end development, and development is still important, but then now there's maybe the startup requires a lot of content as well, seed content to kind of create buzz and things, and there's partnerships. So let's look at something where there is let's say, all right, let's say those are the tasks, and that's how the team decides the contributions are for the public beta phase. All right. Now, in this case, we need to adjust the assumptions for all of them. All right. So again, we're going to say all the development is still going to Carl and Dave for the development, but now Ellen's taking over most of the other tasks, but maybe she's getting some help from both Carl and Dave for different things. Maybe Dave is gonna help with content, whereas Carl will help with partnerships. Ellen's handling all of the sales, and she's splitting the growth hacking with Dave. Okay. Now, since the growth stage may be kind of similar, I'm just going to copy and paste all of the assumptions from this public beta part, and I'm just going to paste it here. So then we'll have something very similar. Right now it would look exactly the same, but we're going to adjust this now. So then there's less development work maybe, or it's not as relevant here, and then but there's more work that needs to be done with analytics, and sales is a lot more important now. All right. So let's say now let's make sure we have all of these assumptions correct, right? So the two things now: sales. Ellen's still doing all of that growth hacking. Now analytics is something that, let's say, Dave is really good at. Okay, and that's 100% to Dave. So now, based on all of these assumptions right now, we're going to have some results from the calculator. And you may have noticed there's a few items here: office, home, car, meals, that is not factored in yet because there's zero weights for any of the phases. I put them there because I want to show you that the co-founders can make other kinds of contributions that are worth something. So if somebody's contributing a company car, somebody's contributing an office or something that is worth value that otherwise the startup would need to pay money for, you could value it. You could add it as a contribution to the appropriate milestone, right? So maybe home office, it could be something where, well, during the first, pre-funding or whatever, the home office is part of every milestone. It could get a token value of a few percentage points across each of the milestones. So that's completely up to you and the team to decide what that's worth. All right, let's take a look at what the results say based on these assumptions here, okay? So now based on these assumptions here, we see that Ellen and Dave are earning a good part of the first two phases, whereas Carl is kind of getting a lot more in the later phases. But you can see based on these by stage where and how each co-founder is earning the equity splits. And you see here's the final recommended split based on everyone's contributions that the team has decided, right? So we see that the two kind of even co-founders are going to be more Ellen and Dave, and Carl's going to be the third co-founder with maybe half of the equity stake. And that's because his contributions are more limited. Now, if we look at the charts by founder, so we see here, because we're not using founder 1 and founder 2, it's going to be just even, and then they're getting 0% and there's zero contribution from them, right? That's okay. Let's see. Okay, I got the names here. I'm going to fix that. But that should say founder 2. In the file you downloaded, it should be fixed. Now, let's look at Carl, Dave, and Ellen's. Okay, Carl, Dave, and Ellen. So we see that for Carl, now remember, he's not getting as much equity in the early stages, but he's earning a lot more of it later. So we see that that's out of his 21%, he's earning pretty much most of it in the 3 stages, 3 milestones towards the back. Whereas Dave and Ellen are kind of earning across, right? Except Ellen's not part of the private beta part, because that's pretty much a full development phase. So now to the right, we see how they're contributing. So we see that Carl's contributions is primarily back-end dev, right? And he's wearing far fewer hats, which can explain why the equity recommendation will be lower for him. Whereas for Dave and Ellen, they're really wearing a lot of hats, even though that for the vast majority of it, they're still wearing just a couple of hats, right? 2 or 3 main hats, but then they're kind of touching everything else. This will lay it out for you to be able to see that. And when you look at the stages, you can see, again, this is just to visualize it for you guys. Now, if you want to look at how the contributions are split, then we can see it in the charts by category, contribution categories. So, for instance, wireframing is 2%, 2.5% of the total pie. We see that a lot of it is going to Ellen. She's doing the wireframe and the UI UX, but let's see, and Dave is owning all of the pitching and closing, right? And Dave owns all of the front end development. Okay. Okay, we didn't use biz dev. But you get the idea. Here now Carl owns all of the back end. So if you want to be able to quickly see and visualize what your team has come up with in terms of the assumptions, it's very easy to see that. And it's quite easy to make adjustments. In the next lecture, I'm going to do another example and try to introduce ways for using this model to set aside equity for either a latecomer to the team, or maybe wanting to set aside a certain amount for angel investors, and just be able to visualize it here using this model as well.